and welcome, and happy to have you join us once again as we sort of move through into this amazing stuff. We'll say the bracha, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And here we are. So we went through this verse, this amazing verse where God says, I appeared to them as El Shaddai, but I never let them know me. They never experienced me. And that is the sense of this word yada, because that's the word we use when we talk about Adam knew Eve. And so the word yada has this connotation of the experience. And, when you start to understand these words in the contextual kind of way, it sort of really opens up meaning, layers of meaning. So for example, the word amar meaning thought, and it says Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or. And instead of translating it as God said, let there be light, you translate it as God thought, let there be light. Has a whole different kind of sense to it, and in some ways makes more sense that way. And saying Adam experienced Eve is sort of a very beautiful way of talking about their intimacy. So anyway, so we were talking about yesterday the different, what it meant by El Shaddai and what it meant by, that it then says about Ani Hashem, that God says to Moses, Ani Hashem. So we're going to go on now. I believe we did everything there that we had on the page. V'gam hakimoti et briti itam. And also, I will establish my covenant with them. And with them is referring to the patriarchs, right? To Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will establish it. Latet lahem eretz Canaan, to give them the land of Canaan. Et eretz megurehem, the land of their sojourning. So when you're a ger, right, there's a sensitivity within the Hebrew, even though sort of the notion of citizenship is, I think, a post-nationalistic meaning. I think, I'm going to guess, that it's more of a post-nationalism kind of thing. Nevertheless, there's a sense of, we translate it as stranger, but the point is, you don't really belong. You are just a ger, megurehem. And so we translate that English word as, use the English word sojourning. Asher garuba, in which they sojourned. So we're going to take a look at any Rashis here. And indeed there are. And there's a very interesting Torah Temimah on this too. V'gam hamkimoti et briti, and I will establish my covenant with them as well. V'gam kishinir eti lahem. So Rashi goes back and sort of connects it to that previous verse and says, and when I appeared to them as well as when I appeared to them as El Shaddai, it's as well. Hitzavti v'hemadati briti b'ni uvenehem. I established and set up my covenant between myself and them. So, latet lahem et eretz Canaan, to give them the land of Canaan. La'Avraham, to Abraham. So Rashi shows where this was stated. But Parshat Milah, in the chapter where Abraham was circumcised, it's at the very end of Lech Lecha. Ne'emar, it says, Ani El Shaddai. It says, I am El Shaddai, etc. V'natati lacha uzaracha or zarecha, and I will give to you and your offspring, your seed, acharecha, following you, et eretz megurecha, the land of your sojournings. And we even have a direct citation. It's Genesis chapter 17. What about Isaac? Let's Yitzchak. So to Isaac, God says, Ki lacha ulzaracha eten et kol ha'artzot ha'el. He says, and to you and your offspring, your seed, I will give all these lands, the hakimoti et hashvuah, and I will establish the oath, or how can I put it? I will fulfill. How about that? I will fulfill the oath Asher Nishbati LaAbraham, which I swore to Abraham, and that's Bereshit Kavav, Genesis chapter 26. V'ota shvu'ah, and that oath, Shenishbati LaAbraham El Shaddai, that I swore to Abraham with the name El Shaddai, Amarti LeYaakov, and I also said to Jacob, Ani El Shaddai, I am El Shaddai, Pre Urve, be fruitful and multiply, etc. And that's Genesis chapter 35. The Et haaretz asher v'gomer, and the land, etc., which I, etc. Hare shenadarti lahem v'lo kiyamti. So behold, I have, or indeed, hare, indeed, I promised them, I swore to them, but I had not fulfilled it. I had not fulfilled the promise. So that's all this part of this conversation that Moses and God are, God and Moses are having. And of course, you remember the context that Moses has already gone to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh has now removed the straw that they used to make bricks and insisted that the Israelites collect the straw as well and still have the same number of bricks they're producing. So this is in a whole different, you can see, whole different direction. Latet lahem, to give to them. And who is he talking about? Who's God talking about? To give to them. What's the context of that sentence? Who's the lahem? Who's the to them? Well, Tana, we have a baraita, an earlier source, prior to the year 200. Rabbi Samai Rabbi Samai says, Min ein letchiat hametim min haTorah. Where do we have a source of resurrection from the Torah? Shene'amar, because it says in the verse we just read, V'gam hakimoti et briti itam, and I shall also fulfill the covenant or establish the covenant which with them, latet lahem et eretz Canaan, to give them the land of Canaan. To them? But he's talking about who?
Well, the patriarchs, and they died before.
Well, this is the whole point, Lauren. Yeah. You get the Starbucks card.
Yeah.
Lachem lo nemar. It doesn't say lachem, to give to you, ela lahem, but it says to them. Mikan, and from this, ela tchiat hametim min haTorah. And this is a source for the belief in resurrection from the Torah. And resurrection, we're talking about physical resurrection. Of course, a lot of thought can go into that concept, and of course it's been questioned from the very beginning. It's not like people back then just simply believed stuff. It was also, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Sadducees denied it, if I'm not mistaken. But one of those early classes or parties or whatever denied the theory of resurrection.
The obvious other alternative is to say, meaning lahem, meaning to their offspring.
That's true. It's true. But it would have been far clearer to say lachem, right?
Except
and then it's, yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
But the promise says actually l'chau l'zaracha, right?
Yes, it does.
So it's both, really.
That's the thing. So it's good enough. Nobody's trying to suggest that this is a compelling proof. It's just that since there was a clearer way to say it, if it wasn't going to suggest that, why didn't it say it?
Right, because it's not merely to the offspring.
Yeah, right.
Well, and there is this kind of logical problem, like the promise was addressed to the Avot, to the forefathers.
Mm-hmm.
They died.
Mm-hmm.
The promise was it referred to the offspring, it referred to the future generations, but it wasn't addressed to them.
No.
And I wonder how many generations have gone by now since Yaakov.
So
And
we actually know that it's not that many generations, okay? As a matter of fact, okay, so Amram is Yaakov's grandson. And he married, not Yaakov, forgive me. Amram. Amram, Moses' father, right, married Yocheved. Yocheved is a Bat Levi. She was, so Amram has to be Yaakov's great grandson because Amram is Levi's grandson, and Levi, of course, is the son of Yaakov, and Yocheved is Levi's daughter. So he must have Amram married his aunt. He married his aunt. Not permitted by the Torah, by the way.
Generations are actually, I imagined it as being much farther away than that.
I know, but it is not. And this is discussed elsewhere. So the 400 years, right? Is it 400 years he mentions? My memory is unfortunate.
That's what I've heard. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I I don't know why.
Right. Well, it's a statement that God says to Avraham prior to the birth of Isaac, and the 400 years is considered to start from the moment of Isaac's birth. That's when the promise starts to be fulfilled.
And considering that you can have a child when you're 100.
Yes, that's true. However, this is discussed. I don't know that we'll actually get to it, unfortunately, because we're not going through everything, but it absolutely is brought up, the issue of how many years, etc. Let's go into the Baruch HaLevi Epstein here. Ritzonor Lomar. So what's being said here? What he's trying to say is, de lahem, that the word lahem, to them, mashma shahivtiach HaKadosh Baruch Hu latet la'avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov et Eretz Yisrael. That the Holy One, blessed be He, promised to give to our ancestors, our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the land of Israel. Uve'emet, okay, halo rak livnehem netana, but in truth, He just gave it to their offspring. Ela melamed, so it teaches, it implies, she'atidim, that in the future, the way this is working, that in the future, lachayot vayinchalu gam hem et haaretz, that in the future they will come back to life and inherit, they too will inherit the land. V'harbe drashot ka'ela ba'u b'gamara, and there are many similar kinds of drashas like this one in the Gemara, in the Talmud. Beremez le'inyan seh. It's considered a remez. It's an allusion, a hint. It's not a strong connection, but logical connection. It's suggested. So one of the forms of, remember, of drash. Ve'ien od, and check more, you can see more, lefanenu, ahead of us, sof perek korach, quite a bit ahead of us, at the end of Parsha of Korach, bepasuk unetatem mimenu vegomer la'aharon hakohen, that you shall give from it to Aaron the priest, and Aaron at the time is not around. So he doesn't have a lot to say about this, but just, it's an interesting, if you haven't ever sort of come across these kinds of drashas, it's good. It's good for you to know these. They're there. Let's go to the next verse. There's some really good stuff here. V'gam ani shamati et na'akat b'nei Israel. Now he gets back to the whole, as we used to say back in seminary, Zitz in Laban, the actual sort of situation that we're talking about of Moses complaining to God, right? And I too have heard the groans of the children of Israel, Asher Mitzrayim Mavidim Otav, in that the Egyptians are bearing down on them with hard labor. They're forcing them to labor. The eskor et briti, and I will remember my covenant. So this sort of, it's so interesting that, as we look at this verse carefully, there's two different subjects sort of being put together here. There is the fact that God is aware of the sufferings of the Israelites, but there's also a connection to, I will remember my covenant. That that this sentence sort of is such a beautiful, captures divine compassion here, that God really cares about what goes on in the world and the sufferings of people. And here, of course, he's talking about how he's going to fulfill this amazing covenant. And in some ways, it's connected to the groaning and the troubles of the Jewish people. It just occurs to me that, and it took me a long time to realize this, but the reason you cannot disconnect the establishment of the state of Israel, that is the permission given by the United Nations with 1947, you cannot disconnect it from the Holocaust. Had the Holocaust not happened, there is every chance the state of Israel would never have come into being, that the United Nations never would have approved it. I like to say, forgive my sarcasm, that for 20 minutes, the nations of the world were concerned about what happened to the Jewish people in the Holocaust.
Not all of them.
Yeah, not even all of them. You're right about that. You're right about that. But look, a lot of water's passed over that dam since then, or gone under that bridge, and a lot of stuff to think about. So let's go on. V'gam ani, and I too, Kamo shehitzavti vehemadati habrit, and just as I set up, and this emadati, they're both basically synonyms, okay? But we say, like after the Shema, we say, like we say emet v'yatziv, so vehitzavti is that, that it's firm. I set up firmly the covenant. Yesh alai lekayem lefanecha. It's my obligation to, to fulfill it. Lefichach, sorry, I said lefanecha. Correct the word. Lefichach. Consequently, shamati et nakat bnei Yisrael hanoakim, that I have heard the groans of the children of Israel who are groaning. So he sort of flips it a little bit from the way I interpreted that verse. So, and in a way, I think I'm hearing here that just as they're groaning and experiencing that reality, I have to bring into reality this promise that I made. Asher Mitzrayim mavidim otam ve'eskor, in that Egypt has forced them into service. I think that's a nice way to translate it. Ve'eskor, and I will remember, oto habrit, that specific covenant. Ki bivrit bein habetarim, because in the covenant between the pieces, and I believe we read this, I think for some reason it seems to me, but maybe we didn't. This is back in Lech Lecha, and Abraham has this deep and dark vision, and this is where God tells him he is going to enslave his offspring and bring them out with in a great kind of way. And in this episode of Brit Bein Habetarim, Amarti Lo, I said to him, V'gam et hagoy asher ya'avodu dan anochi, and the nation which makes them serve, or that they serve, I am going to judge. Okay.
I was just thinking about that, the Rashi right before this one, where he says, Lefichach,
Yes.
alai lekayem,
No.
lefichach shamati.
Yes.
In other words, it's almost like it's reminding me of when a parent is, like when you hear your own child cry,
Good.
you hear it. You hear it even if it's in another room, or even if it's very quiet, you hear it. When it's somebody else's child, sometimes friends say, oh, I'm sorry, our kids are making so much noise. I'm like, I don't hear it.
Yeah.
Not my child. I don't even hear it.
Let me take what you're saying. I love what you're saying, and let me take it a little bit in a different direction, which is, if your own child is hurting, it hurts you more than your own hurt. To see your child suffering is one of the worst experiences you can have in the world. I mean, the truth is that anyone you love, if you deeply, deeply love them, it affects you in a very deep kind of way. Uh, and So again, what's coming out? The words between the lines. That the message between the lines here is the degree to which God loves the Jewish people. And it affects. That's also some of that metaphor of the paved brickwork under his feet, which is this mystical vision that Moses has after the sin of the golden calf. That the divine is affected. And to be emotionally affected as well. So
I think he's affected by the pain of and suffering of all his creatures.
I'm not here to argue that. I think, Lauren, I think you have actually sort of said that you have to be sure to, it's like the statement, well, all lives matter. And I think you explained this so beautifully, in saying that in the context of what the phrase Black Lives Matter is trying to convey, the statement all lives matter misses the point entirely.
Gotcha. Good answer.
Thank you. Well, you see, you speak to me, I listen, and then I get you into trouble. Okay. Lachain. For this reason, Emor livnei Israel, say to the children of Israel, Ani Hashem, I am Adonai. V'hotzeti etchem, and I shall take you out, mitachat sivlot Mitzrayim, from under the burdens of the Egyptians, of Egypt. And it's interesting, by the way, the modern Hebrew word for porter is, unless they've changed it, of course, my modern Hebrew may not be so modern anymore, is saval. And lisbol, means to sort of tolerate, to put up with, but it means to carry, to porter, or to port. Vehitzalt, so we've got this verb, right? Hotzeti. Next verb, vehitzalti etchem me'avodotom, and I will rescue you from their service. V'ga'alti etchem, and I will redeem you, bizroa netuya, with an outstretched arm. So to me, saying outstretched arm has to do with the degree to which God is going to redeem them. Stretching out your arm to bring to safety, right? Even the most far driven, uvishvatim gdolim, and with great judgments. There's another word here, velakachti etchem li la'am, and I shall take you for me as a nation. V'hayiti lachem lelohim, and I will be your God. V'yidatem, and you shall know, you shall experience, right? Ki ani Adonai Elohechem, that I am the Lord your God, hamotzi etchem mitachat sivlot Mitzrayim, who brings you out from under the burdens of Egypt. I mean, I think these are powerful, powerful words. And I want to say that when it says, V'yedatem ki ani Hashem Elokechem, that is like a seal that God is putting on his words. And you find this sort of phrase, I don't know if this is the very first time it's used, but in a sense it's saying, I mean, the way I try to understand this almost literally is that when you experience this, there'll be no doubt in your mind that I exist. So the doubting on the part of humans that that God exists, that there is a transcendent existence, is something that is so old. It's as old as human beings themselves. They've always doubted. We may have different names for it. We may now have the term agnostic and atheist and stuff like that, which are, say, relatively modern. But the behavior isn't modern. It's old. It's out there, and it's sort of so. The suggestion that they're not going to struggle about believing it anymore. By the way, if Rabbi Ephraim Zimin, who is from traditional congregation in St. Louis, I think he used to collect cartoons, and that had some sort of religious, and he had one that I've had for many years, and I'm so sorry because I've lost it, but it was two hand puppets speaking to each other, and the one hand puppet is saying to the other hand puppet, there are times I just don't believe there's a hand.
That's a good one.
It was wonderful. I'm so sorry I lost it. I cannot.
Well, I bet you can find it. If you Google that caption, you might find it. But I was just going to say, is it really a promise that you will believe in me, or is it more a promise that, because I don't know, but sometimes I think that the danger for people in the past was not that they would lose their belief in God, but that they would lose their belief that God cares about them, or is on their side, or is actually compassionate towards them.
Right. It could be, or to the opposite extent, that they had a Gott mit uns kind of attitude about things.
My Yiddish is weak.
Oh, it was something they used to put on the belts of the German soldiers.
God is with us.
God is with us. God is with the emphasis on us. Okay. At any rate, look, so I love the way v'yadatem, and that's the verb that's used, and understanding that the word da'at has to do with experience. So it's another thing, to believe in God intellectually, but to experience God, which is has more of a mystical meaning to it. And in fact, in some of the language of Jewish mysticism, they talk about tasting God, about really, which again, when you think about it, our sensation of taste is a very intimate level of knowledge and experience for us. So it's, yeah, go ahead.
I was just to say there are 3 Rashis on verse 6, and it's 10 o'clock.
Right. So we'll have to, I'd love to think that I had purposely done this to make sure you tune in tomorrow.
And also because those verses connected, in terms of the point you were making. Yes. But Rashi might make some different points tomorrow.
Of course. So tomorrow, with God's help, we will take a look at those verses and hopefully even be able to get into the Torah Temimah.
We'll resurrect Rashi.
I'm sorry?
We'll resurrect Rashi tomorrow.
Yes, exactly. Very well said. And by the way, just to give you a little bit of a tip off, those 4 verbs, velakachti, vehotzeti, vehitzalti, velakachti, vega'alti, or I'm not doing it in the right order, that is sort of the basis of the 4 cups of wine at the seder, the 4 cups of redemption. And Torah Temimah has some cool stuff to say about that. So I'm going to stop the recording and thank those who have been listening to this.